I am going to be introducing the next part of this day, which is really going to connect us to practice and what's happening right now in different major museums. So we're going to be looking for the next 4 case studies at one artwork at a time, and we'll be hearing from presenters what they have been doing in terms of treatment, in terms of code analysis, examination, etc. And then after the 4 case studies, we'll be hearing from Rhizome, who will not be talking about one artwork, but 2,000. So we're getting there slowly. The first speaker I would like to introduce is Martina Haidvogl from SF MoMA. Martina Haidvogl studied conservation and restoration at the Academy of Fine Arts Vienna and Bern University of the Arts in Switzerland, majoring in conservation of modern and contemporary art. Specializing in media art, she has worked in a film lab for the Austrian Film Museum and for the Studio of Video Conservation in Bern, Switzerland. In November 2011, Martina began an advanced fellowship in contemporary art conservation at SF MoMA. Join me in welcoming Martina.
Hello and welcome. Thank you all for being here and thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and to present the first case study to you guys. And I'm even more excited to have Jürg, Lehni, the artist of the artwork, here present with us, and he will be part of a panel discussion later on. The case study I want to present is Jürg Lehni's Viktor, and I want to focus on the acquisition and documentation of the work. So when we collected the work at SF MoMA, and I want to outline to you practices and systems we've put in place to sort of tackle this maybe a little daunting endeavor. But before diving into these topics, I would like to introduce Viktor to you, the actual work, and in fact, I will let Viktor introduce himself to you. So Viktor's development started in 2006, and the work was first installed in 2008. And ever since then, it has been constantly worked on and was developed by the artist Jürg Lehni. Jürg Lehni is a Swiss artist, and I think we can say that his fascination for vector graphics really manifested itself in a series of drawing machines, as well as software-based structures like a software called Scriptographer, which is an add-on to Adobe Illustrator, as well as Paper.js, which is an open source library of vector graphics. Viktor's dimensions are variable with, of course, a certain physical limit to it, and the ideal aspect ratio of the work is a square. The drawing content can be part of collaborations or can be commissioned with each new installation, or can be taken from a collection of previous drawings. And the installation can be presented as a performance, as part of a lecture, or in a recurring exhibition schedule. So the name Viktor derives from the word vector, and just to just to explain this real briefly, because I think it's such a fundamental thing for this work. So vector graphics are defined by a set of parameters. So in this case, we have point A and point B that are defined within the coordinate system, and they're connected with a line, and this line has a certain angle, a certain thickness, and a color. And as opposed to rasterized graphics, vector graphics are indefinitely scalable without getting pixelated. And because you don't have to define each pixel separately, they're also much smaller in file size. In the following, I would like to walk you through the physical components of the work, and I'm using this beautiful also vector drawing by Jürg Lehni. So the installation has 4 nodes, and each of those nodes are comprised of a motor and a controller. So the controller is, you see on the upper right, and as well as the metal steel coil bands that are holding the chalk holder in place. And just a quick word to those motors. These Maxim motors are leading in the field of robotics, and they're even part of the Mars rover. So the motors are moving the coils, and the coils are connected to the chalk holder in the middle. And so the chalk head holds the chalk in place and pushes it towards the wall when it needs to draw, and pulls it back so it can move along the wall without drawing. And the casings of the motors as well as the chalk head are both designed in CAD and laser cut. The movement of the chalk towards and from the wall is done by like a small current that is regulated by a solid state relay in the upper left node. There's a power device in the installation, and then there's the beagle bone. And so the beagle bone is somewhat the heart of this physical setup. And a beagle bone is a low-cost, community-supported open-source hardware. So in other words, it's a mini computer that is really cheap. I think it's $50. And everything about this computer is open source. Like you could even print the platin. And it runs on the also open source Linux operating system Debian. And so this BeagleBone computer holds the whole software that runs Viktor. And it is furthermore connected to a computer either via Ethernet or Wi-Fi. And on this computer is the GUI, and GUI, GUI, stands for Graphical User Interface, and that's just a way to communicate with electronic devices, but via like a very user-friendly interface, say a button or a menu versus the like command or text-based communication. And so this is a screenshot of what you would see in the browser of that computer. And so you see in the middle there's this vector drawing, and on the right we have control options and calibration options. Before I will try to explain the software interface to you, I want to take this moment to thank both Jürg, Lehni, and Mark for their patience in explaining this to me. So I will try to say it in my own words. So we have the BeagleBone that is this mini computer, and on this BeagleBone sits the Viktor master software, which is written in C++, as well as the Viktor interface JS, which is JavaScript. And so there's this Node.js, and Node.js is a runtime environment that can execute JavaScript. And at the same time, it also acts as a server to serve up the GUI. So what it basically does is that it enables communication between the GUI on one side, so what the user enters, to the master software on the other side, because those two cannot talk to each other. And then, depending on what is entered, that is then defer to the motors via the socket CAN interface. Additionally, Node.js loads paper.js, which I mentioned earlier, loads paper.js, and so I just want to mention this because of Jürg's fascination with vectors, and because he was, part of, or he was designing this library, and this is now this integral part of the work. This is not easy, and in fact, I want to share with you the story of how the work was being introduced to us at one of our pre-accession meetings, and we have these pre-accession meetings at SF MoMA, and where all the sort of experts are sitting around the table, and our architecture and design curators, our A&D curators, showed the video to us, the Viktor video, and we all loved it, but they were like sort of shyishly looking around and then said, can we acquire this? And quite frankly, we didn't know, or I mean, we didn't have an answer. And so in the following, I want to present to you the steps and procedures that we've put in place in order to facilitate this acquisition. And I think what I also want to share with you is these like procedures and steps that we've put into place and ways of working with each other within our institutions that gave us a certain confidence, or that has given us in the past and gives us today a certain confidence to approaching these kind of works, even though we don't have an immediate answer. So when SF MoMA acquired the museum, when SF MoMA acquired the work in 2014, we were the first museum to acquire one of Jürg's drawing machines. And so for our acquisition meeting, we were installing the work in full in our mock-up gallery at the collection center, and the collection center is an off-site storage and research facility that we have right now and will have in the future. But that is sort of the hub of where the activity is momentarily happening at SF MoMA while our building is still closed. And I think I just want to share with you these pictures, because in the upper right corner you even see our curator or assistant curator of A&D assisting or helping Jürg installing the work in the galleries. And I also want to say that this was a very challenging time because we had to work towards a very tight deadline. And at the same time, we were launching our first Team A&D. And Team A&D is built on the very successful model of Team Media, and I think most of you are familiar with it. So we have this like consortium of experts at SF MoMA that are gathering together to tackle these questions of media art, and by launching this also for the A&D department, we are responding to a necessity that we saw with this department, also because they've been acquiring more and more works on media or software-based works of arts and design. And it was just a great opportunity to bring everyone together, so all the departments are represented in this meeting, and people could ask questions, and we see Jürg here in orange sweater explaining the work to everyone. Because the installation for this accession meeting was relatively stressful, we asked Jürg if he could spend one more day with us at the collection center and to reinstall the work with us, where we would actually have time to ask all these questions and document step by step on how to install the work. And we had audio and video and photography, and from this meeting, that derived these installation instructions that we put together for each work. And but additionally, this like working with the artist in this way is also confirming a commitment on our side to that we are in for the long run here, and that we are seeing ourselves as a partner to for the artwork's legacy. And so that after the accession of the work, Jürg was suggesting to share the source code with us by giving us access to a shared Bitbucket account. And so Mark will later talk about Git, but I just want to share with you, like, really briefly or high level what this is about. So both SF MoMA and Jürg Lehni, we have our local copies of the code, but at the same time, they are also in this shared account. And here you see all the repositories, and whenever the code changes in some way, and you commit it, that's how you say that, you commit it, you sort of synchronize towards that server, there's sort of that is being tracked, and this is also called version control, and you will hear all about this. And it's also visually tracked, so you can see the red line changes towards the green line. And what I want to share with you additionally is that Jürg also suggested to store the documentation of the work in this Git repository. So you see this up here, and we tried this for the first time, and we will also have a panel on this later, and SF MoMA, I think we've always tried to look into new ways of documenting these kind of works because they are very challenging to existing databases. So what Jürg was suggesting and is to sort of create this documentation in Markdown language, Markdown files, and this is an open source language to format text and image content, and you can see it. So you can see the code on the left, and then these Markdown files can be very easily rendered within a website and formatted into this very nicely looking text. And if you have installed your virtual machine on your computer by yourself, the instructions that Ben was sending were also written in this Markdown, and again, it is widely used at the moment. And so from this we created the whole documentation, and at the moment both SF MoMA and the artist are working together on this shared account and on the documentation. And again, it also lives on both of our digital art server and on Jürg's computer. And in closing, here's some more of the website. So there's terminology, and then there's system architecture. This is how you would set up a new motor. So in closing, I would like to say, I'm already in closing. Maybe I'm closing along. I would like to say that we are very aware of the fragile nature of these kind of works and of the commitment it will take from our institution to preserve them and to show them. And since 2006, Viktor underwent an evolution which might not have stopped with the acquisition of the work. And on the contrary, we are comfortable giving the artwork the space it needs to further evolve. And we strongly believe in establishing and fostering a trusted relationship with the artist as one of our biggest contributions for the preservation of the work. And in the end, I would like to thank Mark Heller for his invaluable and tremendous help that he brings to SF MoMA and in documenting this work. I want to thank Joanna Phillips and the whole TechFocus team for organizing this great conference. And especially, I would like to thank Jürg Lehni, whose enthusiasm and incredible patience in working with us and guiding us through this acquisition and through the documentation was highly appreciated. And thank you. And thank you. really, really value this, and I don't want to contradict you, and I think I just want to say that if you are a conservator in the collection, that you do have these kind of works where there isn't this history, and that's just sort of what you have to deal with. And but yeah, no, absolutely.
Fascinated by this model that you presented of sharing documentation with the artist. I've just never heard of that before. So again, congratulations to SF MoMA. I have to say it sounds very San Francisco and not New York. You mentioned there's a lot of trust involved. I'm actually from San Francisco, but I live in New York now. So my mind immediately goes to, you mentioned whenever the code is changed. So does the artist have the right to change the code whenever they want to? Or is this negotiated?
That is a great conservator question.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we are trained to think about artwork integrity and preservation of that original integrity in the face of new forms of art that inevitably will change. So I think we've all come to the point where we realize we do need to keep changing these works, but are they changes driven by preservation, or are they changes driven by new artistic concerns? And what I'm interested in is how is this controlled by the museum and the artist?
So I think I want to start by saying when we sort of establish a relationship, a trusted relationship, it goes both ways. It's not just we make the artist trust us, but it's actually we also trust the artist. And I think that's one answer. And this work in particular, I think its nature. If you look at its evolution, why would this stop just with the acquisition? And I think I'm not saying that we write like a blank check to artists, but I think we work together with them, and it is both sides. It's a relationship, and I think it's the nature of this work in particular to evolve. But you will be part of a panel later too. Don't take too much away.
Just a risk question. I can answer that quickly. Because in a way, there's no risk because it's on GitHub, right? So you have, if I change things, you have a history of the previous state, and also you can always make a backup. So.
Yeah, but I think you said that. I think we are also changing as a museum, and we're no longer this like, oh no, sorry, you cannot touch this to the artist. I think that is also in flux, and we're practicing this. And actually to have the shared documentation, that came out of the shared Bitbucket account, and I'm really excited about this, to have both the artist and the museum work on that.
How many days did you spend with the artist on the check-in process of this piece? So I understand you mocked up the work just for acquisition purposes. Yeah. You installed this piece just for acquisition purposes.
We fully installed the work, yes.
That is amazing by itself. That requires a budget, that requires time, and you made that possible. And I'm wondering, like, how big is the effort, the time commitment on your side, and which budget covers this? Sorry, this is a very practical question, but it's one that really drives our practices.
So I mean, honestly, I don't personally know what the money was coming from. I would assume it was part of the whole acquisition, that it was coming out of the acquisitions budget. You were in town. Yeah, we were lucky enough that Jürg was in town.
We sort of merged two projects because I worked on the new version of this for the Long Now Foundation, and that's also where a lot of the new kind of improvements are sort of backported from. Also why it's not frozen yet in a way. But so that we merged those two projects in a way. That's how it did help. But I don't know where your budget came from. It was like 3 days, right?
Say that again.
It was like 3 days in total, I would say, 3 or 4 days.
Well, I think with this work in particular, the curators really had the wish to show the work because it's just so awesome to see it live versus just a video. And I think that was where this was driven. And if you if you set your will towards something, you acquire funds and you make it happen. And yeah, and we were sort of like jumping on that to document the work and grab Jürg and.
Sorry, I know we're going to have Jürg, Lehni on the panel in a second, and we're going to continue this conversation. But I'm wondering what the nature is of the improvements that you are making. So we saw this one version now, but what are you doing to it? How does it change much?
Well, I mean, these works, and this is actually then a question that you wrote to me, so maybe I shouldn't answer it right now. I mean, no, because in a way, I never cared about things being, or like being collectible, or, that they would end up in collections. I never thought about this. For me, they were just sort of research projects and explorations, and that concern was either not existing or came at the very end. And yeah, I mean, when they asked, can we collect this, I also had to ask that myself, and in a way, I didn't know the answer. And so, but luckily at the same time, or around that time, the Long Now Foundation asked me if I would make a new version for them, for the space that they have in San Francisco. And so in a way, these two projects sort of developed in parallel, and both in the same city, and it just seemed to be like an opportunity, because if someone else wants to acquire such a piece and run it regularly, it in a way creates a whole new challenges that I never had to address, because I can work with my quirky prototypes, no problem, but no one else can. And this has caused issues in the past with museums just showing them also. So I wanted to address this, and then those were the things I wanted to backport into Viktor. And what came out of this was, in a way, that those are two separate works, but they share a lot of the software and a lot of the hardware. And in a way, I mean, also that would also answer that question, like what can you change in a work and what not. In a way, I think the character is preserved, but the machine is much more reliable. And so it's actually, I feel like now it's in a state that I can write the manual and someone else can run it. Whereas before it would be, yeah, I would have not sold it to a collection with a good feeling. And I'm sort of still not quite sure.
That's actually a really important point you just made, that the acquisition process, the mutual check-in process of the piece into the collection is actually an occasion for the artist as well to kind of wrap up his piece and think of passing it on and allowing people, make it comprehensive, and allowing people, the museum, the institution, the collector, to then sustain it into the future. That's really interesting.
And I think this is also our new role as a museum, to be a partner in this and to, yeah. Thank you.